Welcome to Healing the Tigress, a podcast of stories and conversations on Asian American Pacific Islander maternal mental health. We are your hosts, Peggy, a licensed clinical social worker and certified breastfeeding peer counselor,
and Jasmine, a clinical pharmacist with a perinatal mental health certification. Both of us are Taiwanese American mothers and survivors of postpartum depression and anxiety.
We don't know about you, but we didn't grow up talking much about mental health in our families, and we want to change that now that we are mothers.
Together, with our clinical backgrounds and passion on the subject, we want to create a safe space for the AAPI community to discuss perinatal mental health issues.
And together, we want to break generational cycles in our own parenting journeys so that we can heal our inner tigress, a nod to the tiger moms before us. We are so happy you're tuning in here. Let's get started.
Welcome back to Healing the Tigress. Today, we're going to talk with a guest you may know from her outspokenness about a topic that has been near and dear to our hearts for quite some time, being one and done. Peggy and I have often had conversations about this decision and choice, sitting on the fence, wondering if we could or if we even wanted to have another child after our experiences in motherhood. More and more these days, we are finding the discussion about single children to be quite the heated debate, so we knew we wanted to give attention to this topic and how it related to maternal mental health as well. So today we are thrilled to have Shannon Eng with us on the podcast, who some of you may know better as Cali Girl Gets Fit, or her newer account that she just started, Only Not Lonely Kids. Shannon is an only child herself, as well as a mom to an only child, and she is also a fitness nutrition specialist and a Pilates instructor. But I will let Shannon introduce herself to our listeners more and share with us her cultural background, as well as her journey into motherhood. So thank you, Shannon. Welcome.
Hi, Jasmine and Peggy. Thank you so much for having me here. This has been so eagerly anticipated, so it's great to be here. I can't wait to share a little bit more with all of the listeners out there about my journey and about my story. So I guess I'll just dive right into it.
Yeah.
I'm both third and fourth generation Chinese American. My grandmother was actually born here, and my grandpa came over when he was very young. And so my family has actually been here for quite a long time.
Wow.
But I was reflecting recently about values and, being part of the Asian community. And I feel like the values in our family are still very much Asian and rooted in the history, even though, many aspects of the culture we've assimilated and, we've basically just been here for so long. But it's been a long time that we've been here. So,
Can you tell us a little bit about your journey into parenthood?
Well, I always thought that I would have a lot of kids when I was younger. Growing up, I thought I would have 10 kids. I remember being little and thinking, oh, I love kids. I would love to have a lot of kids. This was, probably I was like, middle schoolish, right? Okay. And so as I got older, then I realized, okay, well, it's not that easy just to have a whole bunch of kids. There's a process involved, right?
Yeah.
So, I spent a lot of time finding the right person and going through lots of, relationships and not really ever finding the person that I wanted to have a family with. And so by the time I was ready, I was in my 30s already. And I was like, okay, we're going to try. And I thought it wouldn't be that hard until it was. And, I had several repeated miscarriages. It took, a long time for me to really grasp and get my head around that because, you don't really think about that when you're first thinking about becoming a mother, right? You think, you see what you see on TV and, it seems so easy and you just have a child. But for me, it wasn't always that easy. So yeah. I think that really kind of led to my decision later on in wanting to just have one child.
Okay. So prior to having children, you actually didn't think that you were planning on having just a single child.
No, not at all. And I actually didn't really know how many kids I wanted at the time, but I wasn't really planning to say I'm going to stop at one, in the very beginning of my journey.
Yeah. So those miscarriages that you experienced, and I'm really sorry that that happened, seems like that really impacted maybe your mental health and your decision down the line.
Yeah, it really did. I didn't really feel like I ever got to fully enjoy being pregnant. It was always worrying about, well, preparing myself for, what if something bad happens, or kind of checking to see. There was this website I used to always go on, which would tell you the probability of having a miscarriage based on how far along you were. And I remember like obsessively, like every day I would go, okay, the probability, is this much. And then the probability went down a little bit as the pregnancy went along. And then I remember even when the pregnancy was very low, or the probability was very low, like, later on, even in my like third trimester, I was still like reading about, okay, like what if you have a stillborn child, like what would it be like, just to prepare myself, because I thought I was so unprepared for the miscarriages from before, that I wanted to be fully prepared for anything that could possibly happen. And so I think that fear, anxiety, that really impacted my mental health, and I wasn't really fully able to embrace being pregnant.
I think people don't recognize sometimes the traumatizing impact of miscarriages. It's like if you have repeatedly had a family member die in your life, like over and over again, how traumatizing that is. And so many people kind of minimize that impact of a miscarriage and how it just painted your whole pregnancy situation, because you're like, what if?
Yeah. Kind of sets up that anxiety.
Yeah. Like the first time I remember, the doctor that I went to, I had the very first miscarriage. After it was all said and done, we knew what was happening and that the pregnancy wasn't going to go forward. He was so nonchalant about it and was like, well, you can have a glass of wine now. It's over. And I just was like numb. Like I didn't really know how to respond to that. Like I just think I like nervously laughed and said, oh, okay, like just I didn't know what to do.
Oh my gosh.
I got a new doctor after that. Yeah, and so I feel like society minimizes it so much, especially if it's very early on. So the first one was very early on. The second one, I was sort of not expecting it again because I got past that very early on stage. And so it was like the probability was less. And so I was like, okay, everything's going to be okay. And then one day I went in for a checkup and they told me, there's no heartbeat anymore, even though we saw one before. And so that I feel was like the second like punch in the gut, you know what I mean? Like just to say like you thought it was going to be okay and now it's not. So I think that's why I just had in my mind like, oh, it's okay. I have to just be so like worried all the time. And so yeah, it's hard.
Those losses seem to sort of like probably set you up for anxiety in a way that you had to sort of always be on guard, it sounds like. Yeah. So, you kind of mentioned, prioritizing your mental health and well-being over having more children. So after you had your child, did you suffer from any known postpartum depression or other perinatal mood and anxiety disorders that sort of carried over after the birth?
So I didn't formally ever get diagnosed with anything after the birth, but it was sort of a weird time because it was right before COVID started. So, my baby was born right before lockdown. And so everything was really unknown. And I feel like even if I wanted to get diagnosed or, see somebody, like people weren't taking new patients, like people were telling you not to come into the doctor to see the hospital. Like I remember even my follow-up appointment after having a C-section, which I feel like is a major surgery, was like through a video chat. And it was like, are you okay? How do you feel? Can you show me like your scar through the video chat? So,
oh my gosh.
It was just such a weird time and I just felt so unsupported. Nobody came to check on me and then everything was locked down. So nobody visited, nobody came to see the baby. It was just like feeling like you're on an island with nobody there.
Yeah. And I think we've heard some of our other guests also say how like lonely and how just sort of isolated, like you were saying, like during the pandemic, because people just weren't sure. And that's so strange to me. Like even your OB like follow-up visit, the one visit that you get, right? They can't even see you in person to like check or feel or like, look. And that just seems so weird to me to do that over the phone. I think actually I had another friend that told me the same thing. And I was like, what? Like you had a C-section and your doctor just did a video visit with you? Like
it's like a major abdominal surgery. It's like anything else that you need to check on?
It's already like insufficient as it is, I think, just to have that 1 6-week visit and then just to sort of like brush that off. That sucks. I'm so sorry that that timeline worked out like that. Yeah.
The funny thing was that like for the baby got to come in to get visits. So, and for like all the well checks, that was in person still. But they never care about the mom. It's like, you gave birth. You can go away now.
Yeah, that's like they discard
it's so
you.
Sad the way it is.
Yeah, it's funny. Jasmine and I have been talking about this a lot lately. Just the discrepancy between the care for the mother-child dyad after birth, and like you said, you get to bring the baby in person, but you were like major abdominal surgery. Let's just have one video visit, and it just blows my mind, but also makes me wonder how much of this discarding of the mother after birth contributes to these postpartum mood disorders. Because all the systems are telling you you're not important and only your baby is important. Like, it's no wonder there's so many perinatal mood disorders. Like, we're told after you've brought this baby into the world, you're not important anymore.
You're basically just a vessel. I think that's what it seems like.
Right.
That makes me sad. So after, you had your child, then I guess as you were becoming a new mother, it seems like you came to the decision that you only wanted one child. When did you sort of know or solidify that you might only want to have this one?
I think it was that whole first year experience of motherhood that just made me decide I'm not doing this again. I think my baby was also up a lot. So I remember I was actually looking at our old sleep logs because we had this new bassinet and it gives you a little log of how much did your baby sleep? And a cousin of mine just had a baby. So I was looking at our old sleep logs as we were chatting about it. And I realized that even at around 5 months or so, my baby was still only sleeping about 2 to 3 hours at a time. So I was still waking up around the clock, nursing, around the clock. And it was a long time. It was just a long time to just not be able to sleep.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people just kind of forget about the newborn stage and how tiring it is. And, but when you're doing it all by yourself, you don't have a lot of support. You really feel like, I'm not doing this again. So I think it was after a whole year of that.
Around the 1 year mark.
Yeah, around the 1 year mark.
Probably I finally made it to a year. Do I really think I want to go back and do that again?
Right. And you kind of get your life back a little bit and you're like, I kind of want to keep it. I want to keep it like this.
Yeah. I think sometimes it's I did it. I went through the birth. I went through I went through the pregnancy. I went through the labor. I went through those sleepless nights. I made it. I have this beautiful child. Do I have to do this again? And it's so hard.
Yeah. And then I was thinking, I don't have a lot of support if I had another one. I don't know who would be taking care of the other child. So then I'd have two of them. It would be that again, but then plus, a toddler, which I don't know. I don't know how people do it. They're the ones that can do it successfully amaze me, but I don't think I can.
I think that's something you've also been sort of vocal about on social media is the fact that it seemed like the village never showed up for you. And part of it maybe was the pandemic, kept people away. But do you think, how do you think having support nearby really impacts a family's decision to expand or not?
Well, I think it makes a huge difference. I mean, just that little bit of time, even if you get a few hours every day to yourself, I think it makes a huge difference. Right? Especially as a new parent. And so if you don't have that support, I feel it's quite overwhelming just to think of the idea of having to do it again and realizing that you probably aren't going to get support again and going through that. Because I think that's also part of the mental thing, right? That leads to, a lot of stress, postpartum depression, is realizing that like nobody showed up for you. And so I think reliving that and having nobody show up for you again, it really makes you remember how you felt at that time. And it's something that I really just don't want to go back to again.
Yeah, I think I remember reading somewhere about just how much the modern nuclear family is just not sustainable. And when you say that it takes a village, yes, it's a saying, but it's literally because back in the olden days, there literally was a village or a tribe or, hunter-gatherer. It would be a bunch of maternal figures helping care for everybody's children in this like more collective society. And now in our more modern world where it's like we have our little nuclear family, we probably some of us don't live that close to our extended family. And if we do, it's just really hard. Or you had mentioned before having children a little later in age where even if we had support from our parents or could have support, they're so much older. And so just trying to do motherhood in a modern society in a nuclear family without that village is really contributing to a lot of these mental health things that we're struggling with.
And I think it's hard. People tend to sort of stigmatize only children, saying that like, oh, they're going to be lonely or like they're going to be selfish or they're going to be spoiled. And I think like a lot of those things have actually been debunked. But I think that the culture of perpetuating that stereotype, whether it's through like media or just, passed down these sort of ideas, it's kind of harming. I think that's kind of harmful to the narrative, and especially nowadays where it's so much harder to parent. I think it puts a lot of stress on parents to say like, oh no, I have to have like that nuclear 4-person family at the minimum. And a lot of people say children are going to be lonely, but obviously your new Instagram page is called Only Not Lonely. So as an only child yourself, you grew up as only child. Can you speak to the misconceptions about loneliness?
Well, I think people just have this perception of the sad little child in their room with a room full of toys and nobody interacting with them. And they forget that there are so many other things that come into, socialization and a person, seeing other people. And so, as a child growing up, I was always around people. I mean, we have a lot of extended family. We are actually planning this big family reunion, and we have like 75 people coming to it. I mean, it was like aunts and uncles and extended cousins and, all of these family members that I would always see, when I was growing up. And I'm really close to some of my cousins. So, there's other kids my age. And then, my parents were always there. And the interesting thing that people think is that, the only children are just left to be alone all the time. But I wasn't. My mom was always there. She played with me. My dad, was really interactive. So I always had adults. And then we had like neighborhood kids that I would always be playing with. Someone would always be coming over to the house, or I would go like visit their house, So there's this other like aspect of another side of the vibrant community that a lot of times people don't think about. And they think, well, a social interaction among kids needs to be contained in the house. But really there's like a whole outside world that people don't think about.
That's such a good point about like how, and as you were saying this, I was just thinking like, yeah, maybe people think that like, oh, I'm only supposed to be like in my house with my household alone, which further almost like isolates you in this society we're talking about, Peggy, like how like, we've kind of disconnected our village because we think we need to be this like sole unit all on our own and be self-sufficient and independent, so that we need to generate our own, playmates or something like that. But you're right, Shannon, like there's other people all around you. There's classmates, there's playmates, there's neighbors, there's cousins. And I think almost like because you are a single child, it's like you seek out more of your community too, to like to make those connections. It's almost like you have an excuse to invite people over, to go out and do things, which might actually not be a bad thing, I think.
Totally. And I think as being an only child, I developed the ability to talk to anybody, like just to go, to a party and to find people to talk to, or find somebody with, common interests or people to socialize with. And I actually noticed that a lot of people who had siblings or who had, say if you have a couple brothers and sisters and you went to a party, sometimes they will just socialize among themselves, or they'll kind of just play with each other instead of actually seek out other people to play with or to meet. So I think actually being an only child might make you even more social because you're kind of forced to step out of your comfort zone and meet new people.
Yeah, I think that's totally true. And when you just said that about how like going to social gatherings, people would kind of stick with their siblings or whatever, I'm like, I was guilty of that. When I went to places and stuff, I would just kind of stick with my sister and just hang out, you know, until I felt comfortable enough to like step out to maybe talk to somebody. But you're right, like you're kind of made to seek out other social connections and try, which is not like a bad thing, I think. So. You know, the other thing to me is that, like, I wonder if this also plays a factor on, like, our pressures to have more children, is that it seems like a lot of the older Asian generations highly value having many children. And this, I don't know if this is different for you because your family has been here for many generations already. So,
not at all.
Yeah. So, I mean, despite not being second generation Asian, like, do you ever feel like there was pressure from your family to have more kids?
Yeah, definitely. Like, I remember, I don't know, my son was maybe like around 2-ish, and my mom was like, okay, so, you know, for the next one, I think you should try to get a girl.
For the next one.
And then you can have
just so easy.
The next child. And I was like, why?
It's like, choose a Pokemon. I want a girl now. Like, what?
Yeah. And she was like, because I saved all of these things from your childhood, so I need to give them to somebody. So, like, have a girl.
Oh, my gosh.
And so I was just like, oh, okay, well, I don't know. You know, I might be kind of all done. And, you know, but I think even though my mom had me and I was an only child, in her mind, she's like, still have more, you know, which I find to be so funny. And I hope I don't do that to my child. I'm going to remember not to do that.
Do you happen to know if she was one and done by choice or not by choice?
You know, I actually don't know. And it's something that she's never really talked to me about. But I know that for her generation, she had me a little bit older. Like, I think she was 32 or so when she had me. So she was on the older side, right?
For their generation, yeah.
But I feel like for their generation, it totally was, right? Like, everyone in their generation, I feel like, had kids before 30. And so I'm not sure. And I've kind of been afraid to ask. But she was like one of 3. So, you know, she had siblings. And I feel like if I jumped up and announced that I was pregnant today, she would be so excited about it. I remember also my grandma was like, you need to have more, but she's like, you know, the generation before that, right? So she was like, you need to have more, you know, so like, you know, your child will have somebody to play with, and, you know, what if something happens and, you know, somebody needs to take care of you, you know, kind of like things. So I feel like a lot of the older Asian generations think in terms of who's going to take care of me when I get older, right? So if I have a lot of kids, out of all those kids, somebody's bound to take care of me. Or if something happens to somebody, someone will be left over to come and, you know, take care of me when I'm older. And we don't really have that anymore. I feel like we're pretty self-sufficient, you know.
It's like a cultural expectation, right? You're expected to care for your elders. So they need to have an insurance policy. And if one of these is not taking care of me, the other 3 might, or something, right?
Right. That's true. And you're right. It is a little bit of a, you know, we respect and take care of our elderly, and that's sort of baked into our culture, right? But then at the same time, like, I think maybe their form of love is like, I'm not putting all my eggs in one basket, and I'm not putting all the pressure on one person to take care of me, because then that would be super expected of that one child. And at the same time, I think about like how I hear stories of people who say, I have so many siblings and yet I am the one stuck taking care of my parents, and that the other siblings have just not pulled their weight. They're all across the country, or they're all spread out, and then I'm the closest one, so I end up being the default person taking care of my parents. So I don't necessarily think having siblings is an, quote, insurance policy or a guarantee that all that labor and division and work and care is spread out evenly amongst everyone. So, I mean, just kind of, I think every family is different.
Yeah.
You know, you can't guarantee what's going to happen, right? So it's a little bit to say that like I'm going to have these children for this purpose. I don't necessarily think that's like the reason you should have more children.
Yeah, definitely not.
My mom was one of 7, and when my grandpa died, it was like all fighting over who's going to handle the stuff. It's like, there's 7 of you, someone decide.
Yeah. Then it boils down to inheritance too, where it's like,
right.
Mm-hmm. How do you split that up?
Yeah, and everybody just, I don't know. I feel like at least I don't have to worry about that.
Yeah, that's true. And sometimes I think with the Asian culture, at least from my what I've seen in families or my side that I've seen, is that everything gets left to the boy. It doesn't matter if you are the oldest or whatnot. There's another sort of like weighted heavily more towards favoring boys, as like the Chinese culture has sort of been. And then that creates a lot of resentment and bitterness too, because a lot of times what I've seen is like it's all the daughters that are taking care of their parents, and yet all the inheritance and everything gets left to the son, which I think is then just, you know, it becomes a different thing, a different kind of battle, right?
And I think for the girls, the expectation is totally different, right? So I've seen in a lot of Chinese families, like the girls are expected to be more nurturing and to take care of the parents and to do all the things, and the boys are expected to go off and live their life and have their own family, and you know, they're not expected to come back and, you know, be with the parents all the time. And I just think it's just a different expectation, and you're right, it just makes it really hard.
And one thing for Asian families, at least, and maybe just even generally, I feel like there's this feeling that people don't really see mental health as the reason, like as a valuable or viable reason for our choices. Like whether it's, you know, you're taking a day off or you're saying no to something, or, you know, if it comes to our bodies and our family size as women, it's like, what do you think you'd say to people who kind of dismiss mental health as a reason to be happily one and done?
Well, I think for our generations, it's getting better in terms of us taking care of our mental health. But the other generations before us, not as quite as much. But, you know, you can't pour from an empty cup, right? So if you want to be the best parent to your children, if you want to be there for them and you're able to take care of all of their needs, both, you know, physically, mentally, the whole package, you have to have your own mental health, right? You have to be mentally healthy yourself, because you can't take care of somebody else in that way if you're not. And there are just so many people who neglect themselves. I feel like sometimes mothers are judged, you know, if you put yourself last, you're a good mother, right? If you put everyone else's needs before you, you're doing a great job. You're so selfless. But on the other hand, there's just comes to a point where we break down. We can't do that forever. And when our mental health is neglected, other things happen where, you know, one day we just can't take it anymore. And then what would happen then, you know? So I really think it's important to address mental health before you get to that point and make sure that, you know, you're doing okay.
The expectation for motherhood to be martyrdom is just so steeped in like our culture and society. But what is a martyr? Someone who like dies for someone else. But like if we're not around, who's going to mother? So I think it's just so tough to juggle this, like motherhood is a sacrifice, motherhood is martyrdom. But in order to really be there for our children, we have to be there. We have to be there mentally, physically, emotionally. And I think maybe for some people, some of our listeners who maybe have 2, 3, 4 kids, maybe they are able to find that balance because of whatever supports they have. And I think everyone's unique mental health is unique to them. Maybe for some people, it's like, in order for me to be the best mom I can be, I have to choose to only have one child. I do not have the mental capacity to do this again, or I do not have the mental capacity or the resources to go through, you know, newborn stage again. And for some other folks, maybe they can. Maybe for some other folks, they're like, I can definitely do this with 2, but I could not do this with 3. And I think that's one thing to also honor, is that one person's mental health looks so different than others. And I think that's what sometimes I feel like some one and done folks struggle with. Like, what does that say about me that I can't do this again, but my other friends can. And it's like, no, your mental health needs are unique to you. And that doesn't make you weaker or lesser than or anything. It's like you are putting forth what is going to take care of you. And I think that needs to be honored. And everyone's journey is different, but I think that needs to be honored.
I agree. Yeah. I remember on one of my posts, I posted about, mental health and reasons for being one and done. And somebody in the comments was like, you must be doing something wrong.
Oh,
You're just not doing it right. It's you that's failing because I'm able to have, I have my mental health and I have 4 kids and we're all doing great. And so I just kind of took a step back from that to think, well, that's amazing. I'm very happy for that person that they are able to do all that. But we also don't know what supports they have in place, right? We don't know what their family looks like, their family structure. Like maybe they have some more outside help or they have a village to help them. Maybe financially they're able to afford more resources so they can hire help. So the picture of everybody's family looks so different, like you said, Peggy. And I think we just need to respect and honor, everybody's wishes and needs and, what they feel is right for their family.
And not everyone had the same experience with their first. Like for you to be like, oh my gosh, my baby's still waking up. Or, hey, I spent all my pregnancy wondering what is the chance that I'm actually going to get to see this baby and how much that plays into it. And people don't put those factors in. They just think, okay, go make me a girl now. It's there's so much that plays into it.
I think we need to stop playing the comparison game that like, oh, just because I can do it, you should be able to do it too, right? Like you said, their family structure is different. They might have more financial support and resources. And the other thing that we don't talk about is also like, how easy is it for you to get pregnant? Fertility issues, right? Like, great, you have 4 kids. Somebody might be struggling even to just have one, even to just conceive one child. And so the pain of that, I think, we really need to respect, like you say, that everybody is kind of different and not to sort of like shame or like devalue somebody else's experience. So there's this other thing I sometimes think about that, Peggy was talking about knowing like your limits or your capacity and knowing that like, at this point, I think this is it and I'm done and I'm happy and we're good. But I think knowing when to stop sometimes is a lot harder when we sort of always envisioned or see that this is what is, quote, normal around us. So to actively actually pull back and hold back and not do something, to see that as like your, quote, more, it's really hard because people just want to actually physically see more, that you're doing more. Society has like this huge pressure on doing more and more and more, but sometimes less is more, like, and that people just can't actually see it because they don't see the things you're doing when you don't physically see something there. And I always think that like it's easier sort of to regret an idea than to actually regret an actual human being. Like no parent is actually going to come right out and say, I regret having a second child. Nobody's going to come and like admit that, right? Because that's just so taboo as well. Like you can't say that. Once you have it, it's your responsibility. Like you have to keep going, right? But then on the flip side, I feel like we can't shame the people who like actively made that choice to say, I think that like I don't want to create another human being and feel like I can't give them my all. So that's just kind of my take on it.
Well, it's interesting because I came across some Reddit forums where people like write in anonymously, right? And people on there are like, I regret having a child, like one of my children, or, I regret, but they won't tell you in person, right? They won't tell somebody they know, or they won't say it out loud to, unless they're anonymous. But there are people out there who I feel do regret having, a child for whatever reason it might be. And I feel like, there's nothing wrong with that because that's how you feel, right? That I'm not shaming them for feeling that way. But on the other hand, like if I know that I might potentially have that regret, like I just wouldn't want to go down that road.
Yeah, I think that's a good point to make. You're not going to you can't let your child hear that you say that. And so I think for some of us that like have sort of had a really difficult experience, if you went through some sort of postpartum depression or anxiety and you're trying to make this decision, it can be kind of hard to think like, am I going to have to relive this again? Because, statistics do show, at least, if you've had it once, 50% chance you're probably going to get it again. It's pretty likely you could get it again.
Mm-hmm.
And my therapist, like I've gone into like deep therapy thinking about if I want another child, is always like, well, but you're coming from experience the second time around. And yes, that is true. I'm coming from experience. But the other part is like, I still physically have to do all of this again. I physically have to do the sleep deprivation, the nursing if I'm planning to do that again, the getting up. And then on top of that, I have another child I have to take care of who I will feel like I'm being split, like I can't give my attention to that child. So, just for me, like what I've kind of come down to is that like, I don't think I physically want to do that again. Like, I don't know if I could physically put myself there to live through that again, because people will tell you, oh, you can do it again. Like, you won't get it again, or like now you know better, but they're not the ones living through it. It's still you. It comes down to you.
Right. And just because you have the potential to do it doesn't necessarily mean you should.
Exactly. Exactly. That's it.
It's funny. There's a saying that we say all the time at work, like you have the skill, but not the will. Like I could do it again, but I don't want to.
Yeah.
Like, just because I can doesn't mean I want to. And you're right. At the end of the day, no one was in your shoes.
Yeah.
Those sleepless nights, no one would, except for you. Like and especially the people who kind of like ask, well, are you going to be there to wake up and feed my baby? Like, why are you asking?
Exactly.
Even if they were, I still don't think I would want to do it.
Well, there's another thing too, I think, with people who have anxiety and stuff too, there's a sense of like locus of control, right? Even if like I had help, now I have another factor, like for me at least, it's like, well, then I'm going to have to vet somebody to be able to take care of my baby that's outside of me. So there's extra things you have to set into place, wondering like, if you have this support and like, is this good enough? I don't know. Just my sort of own anxious thoughts is like, I still have to find somebody that I can accept as being somebody that can take care of my baby and help me out to, I guess my satisfaction as well. We have these anxious moms, you're always like wondering like, oh, I don't even want anyone else touching my baby at this point. And there's another concept that I've heard of more that like nowadays, and maybe not just nowadays, but there's this sort of other concept that people think double or nothing. Like it's better to have 2 kids or none at all, like than to just have one child, because you're depriving, quote, your child of the experience of a sibling. So if you're going to have a child, either you have 2 or you have like none at all. What do you think about that concept?
Well, I think these are the people, again, that think it's so bad to be an only child. Just think you're going to be so lonely, right? It's actually, it's not that bad. It's really not. And I think to deprive somebody of motherhood just because you only want one and you don't want 2, like it just seems so silly.
Yeah.
It's like saying, well, if you're not going to buy 2 cars, you shouldn't have any cars, so then you just have to walk. Like, it just doesn't make sense.
Such a good analogy.
I love that. Oh my God.
So, I mean, I just think about it like, I just don't even know where these people come up with this. And it's not, like I said, it's not even that bad.
Yeah.
And growing up, being an only child, I'm actually a pretty introverted person, so I actually really liked it. Like being able to go out there and socialize and see people, but then I had my own little like room where I can just come home and it would be quiet.
Yeah.
And I can just kind of be by myself. And they did all these studies on people, even if you're not an only child, but you spend time by yourself, you spend time alone, it actually makes you, it just changes you for the better. You are able to unleash your own creativity. You get great ideas when you're alone. And I actually read in an article that you become more empathetic when you're by yourself, because if you're always with people, you're not really thinking about others' feelings that much, because you're like, socializing and you're kind of in the moment. But if you're by yourself, you have kind of more time to think, right? And you can reflect. And so I think it's those reflections that actually sometimes give us more empathy.
Yeah. Yeah. So you're saying, and I get it. Like, even if you're not an only child, having the alone time is really important, right? So
Totally. Yeah.
I love that you're able to also speak with this authority of like, I'm an only child. I came out just fine. Like,
sort of. Right.
I mean, we're all a little, I mean, we're here
Relatively,
because
right.
we're all needing healing, right?
Mhm.
But you know what I mean? That it's
Yep.
like, oh, they're demonizing this only child idea, that it's like we're all some sort, like people who are only children are X, Y, and Z. And you being able to say like, I grew up as an only child. Nobody has a perfect childhood, but here I am. I've got all my arms and limbs and stuff. Right? Like, I
Right.
make wise decisions. I take care of my child, right? Like, and I think, you know, sometimes like I wasn't an only child. And so then I always grapple and wrestle, but also recognizing like, well, even having a sibling wasn't perfect. I don't have a best friend in my sibling, you know what I mean? And it's like the things that people say to be like, but you should, these are the benefits of giving your child a sibling. And like, I can see some of them, but I also can see a lot of those things, like you said before, you're going to get those same type of life lessons interacting with cousins, interacting with neighbors, interacting with other children. It's not like an only child is doomed to a life of like psychopathic whatever, like they're not around the world. And it's just so I would be really curious to dig like where do these myths come from, like who invented them?
Actually, I think, and I don't know the study or whatever off the top of my head, but I do recall like listening to something before saying that like there was at one point in history where somebody kind of came up with that notion, or in order to push for people to have more kids, they started to sort of put out this quote propaganda that like, oh, you can't just have one child. It's not healthy for your kid. And to increase like the population or like make people have more babies or have a bigger workforce, or for some reason they pushed for people to have more kids. And so that's sort of like the general conception, sort of how it was born. And the other thing too is that like I feel like with capitalism, it's like having more benefits, the capitalistic society, right? They want you to push you for more so you can spend more money, you can like, you know, invest more and like all these things, right? So it is actually like maybe a societal driven kind of thing, like a certain like advantage for you to have more kids, right? So maybe that's where it sort of came from, where they started demonizing the only child. But studies have shown now that like, you know, there's nothing, like only kids are not more selfish, not more, you know, whatever, all those things like stereotypes that you kind of put out there. I actually kind of feel like a lot of only children I know, like as my friends, and the only children I see now growing up, a lot of them are actually quite generous because they have all their needs met at home. They don't feel like they constantly have to fight or compete for things because they always feel like their needs are being met. And so I actually see a lot of them being quite like generous to share with their friends. They're not going to like take the last piece, or they're going to offer the last piece of something to somebody else, which I've actually seen my own daughter do. So, and this is, I don't want to like people to feel like, oh no, I should have had an only child, or like, you know, like I feel like just everyone needs to do what's like best for them. But I think the purpose of this discussion is because only children are so like stereotyped that we're trying to like make people see that like it's not so bad, and like there's nothing wrong with it, like you said, Shannon. Like,
I mean, I think it's amazing when people have big families. I love seeing big families, like big happy families that, you know, are all gathering at the table, or, you know, doing things that big families do. But, you know, I always think back to myself too. Also, if we were like back in the day where we had to be rural farmers, and if I had only one child, my farm would probably fail, and everybody would tell me like, yeah, you have to have more kids because, you know, who's going to be like harvesting the crops and, you know, weeding the garden and doing all the stuff, right? But we're not there anymore. We've progressed and we've evolved from that. And so I think in a modern society, it's okay.
I also think if there's any generation that could not pump out, sorry, but like make really great only children, it's this generation. Like you hear so much about how millennial parents are parenting so different than our previous generations. And I think that, you know, we've been talking so much about the mom's mental health when it comes to only children, but we're also a generation that really cares about our child's mental health. And I think these stereotypes of the, you know, selfish, spoiled only child, I highly doubt that's going to happen in this generation of children that are only children, because vastly different parents who are much more aware of their mental health, of what, you know, a child really needs, and being able to balance those things.
Yeah, I mean, we've definitely come a long way.
I think only children are not all the kids this generation are taught to be more empathetic, more kind, more generous. Like, so it's just our parenting generation
right.
in general.
And boundaries a big thing for us, right? So boundaries,
yeah,
teaching our kids boundaries, and then also modeling those boundaries ourselves by being able to say, no, I'm not having any more kids. So
yeah. I think one thing that like I get a lot of or hear or this sort of guilt and pressure is that like there's no one to share the caretaking burden or grieving with when your parents pass, and they kind of worry about that for their child, that like, oh no, if I don't give my child a sibling, then they're not going to have somebody to like, commiserate with when I'm gone or something like that. I don't know if you have any thoughts about that.
it's such a grim thing to think about, but I know it for a lot of people it's like it's a thing, I guess, but I never really thought about it until a lot of people on social media started leaving comments like, who's going to take care of you when you die?
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, I'm not planning to die anytime
Yeah.
soon. So it didn't even cross my mind.
I don't know why that's the first thing sometimes people come to, like, to talk about, is that like, oh, but then like, what are you going to do when you're old? Or like, what are you going to do when you're dead? And like, what are your kids going to do?
What are you going to do when you're dead? It's like,
God. Your kids are going to be
adults.
Your kid's going to be an adult at that point.
Yeah.
They're going to have a family.
Yeah.
They're going to have people around them. Like, they'll figure it out,
Yeah. And like, so, our kids will probably, they'll have, a family or, a partner or somebody, right? As they get older and they become part of your family too. And I would hope that I have a good relationship with that person, right? Whoever their husband or wife or whoever they choose as a partner. And then their kids, they become part of your family, right? So they wouldn't really be all alone. Right. Just, I don't know, visiting your grave every day or something. I don't know, it's so grim. I don't even want to think about it. But
yeah.
I
think one thing too is, again, having a sibling doesn't guarantee that you're going to have someone to lean on when your parents die.
Yeah.
Like, again, it's like the whole thing where, oh, giving your child a sibling gives them a best friend. And it's like, that's not always true. That's not true at all. And I know plenty of people who, when their parents died, it just caused a rift. Like my mom is a great example. 1 of 7. And when my grandfather died, she no longer talks to like a huge chunk of her siblings. And it just caused a lot of drama. And there was nobody really to lean on. And I think, again, we can't be like, siblings are an insurance policy that your child will not be lonely in whatever aspect of life, whether you're dead or whatever. It doesn't ensure that. And who's to say the cousin can't be there for you, or another friend? You're even if your child doesn't get married and have kids, they'll have friends. And even if they, worst case scenario, even if they don't have friends, forbid this happens, the whole point of parenthood is to eventually have your child be independent and not need you. And so when you're not on this earth anymore, they will have become a full-grown human adult that has other coping skills and resources available to them that isn't going to be made better because they had a sibling. I mean, those are my 2 cents. I don't think about this very often, like what's going to happen when I die, because I'm also like, when I'm dead, and I can't do anything anyway. Like, my hope is that we raise our children in a way that when we're gone, they will be fine, right? You want to raise your child in a way that when we're not around, they are fine and they are independent and have skills and has life. By then, hopefully they're much older. Hopefully we live long, long lives and they're much older, to be in a place where they have, I have this whole life of my parent raising me to be a person who can handle anything, right?
That's beautiful. Yeah. And honestly, with the state of the world these days, I'm kind of like, I don't really know if I want to bring another child into this world to like let them see all the craziness that is, whatever's going on, and climate change, and like, I'm just like, I'm glad I'm not going to be alive like for all of this in like before the earth implodes, basically. I'm like, I don't think Mother Earth needs more human beings on this planet. So I've done my fair share, but Anyways, thank you for sharing all this stuff with us, Shannon. And where can people find you, or where should people find you if they want to learn more about you or hear more about what your pearls of wisdom about being an only child or having an only child?
Well, I just started the new account, Only Not Lonely Kids. Being an only child, that's not lonely. So that's where you can find all of my posts about being an only child, some tips on raising an only child, and a little bit more about me. I still have Cali Girl Gets Fit, so and I occasionally post on there, about postpartum recovery, diastasis recti, exercises, and things like that. So you can find me there as well.
Great. Thank you so much. And, we always like to end our episodes with sort of wrapping up and talking about maybe what we might want to do for our mental health this week, as a form of giving our listeners maybe some ideas that they can do for themselves. So we'll kind of go around if anyone has something they want to share about what they might want to do for their mental health this week, or what they have already done maybe this week. I'll go first. I think I have maybe something off the top of my head, but I noticed that when I don't drink enough water, I tend to get more headaches. And so this week, I actually noticed a few times. I was like, man, why is my head so like my neck so tight? And then I realized oh my gosh, I've actually not picked up my water bottle, and some of it is because I had a cup of tea, and so I finished the cup of tea, but I didn't go back and grab more water. So I need to be more conscious of keeping my water bottle around me. And I think water definitely one of those things where people say oh, if you're not in a good mood or you're not feeling well, you have to think about check yourself. Are you hydrated? Are you rested? All those things. So for me this week, I think I have to be a little bit more conscious and worry about my water intake.
That's a good one because I've been sipping water this whole time.
I know. I'm recovering from a cold, so I have to do it. I was like you and not drinking enough water, and then I cough, so it's like a reminder, drink water.
Yeah. No, same here.
I was gonna say the water one. That's so funny that you started with that one, but I actually have a second one that I can do or say. One thing that I have been really trying to work on more is trusting my own intuition and my own gut, and not necessarily needing to make decisions and ask input from so many people to make decisions. And so I think this past week, I was really kind of wrestling with something and being oh man, I don't know, I need to make this decision. I wonder if I can squeeze in a last minute appointment with my therapist. And I managed to do that, but I actually practiced trying to process this decision in my mind actually before seeing my therapist. And so by the time I saw her, I was I actually made my decision. And it felt really good to be I need to really practice not looking outside of me when it comes to, maybe hard life decisions, or it wasn't even a giant life decision, but just decisions I need to make or whatnot. And being able to feel confident in trusting myself and learning to trust myself more and finding the answers inside myself, which is a good sign of a good therapist. Is she's not going to tell me what I need to do. She's going to guide me to find it in myself anyway. But to be able to do that without being and I need that external validation to make sure I made the right choice. And so that was a nice little practice I did this week.
I really love you said that right now, because this whole episode, I feel with the one and done choice.
Yeah.
I felt myself, when you were saying that, I was shoot, for a while, I felt I was seeking a lot of external validation, and my therapist would be okay, all these reasons you're telling me, it's what would your husband think? What would your family think? What would, your friends think? And what about you? What do you really want inside?
Right.
And I had to really pause and think, I don't know, because I feel maybe I make a lot of decisions based on if I get affirmation from somebody else. And I really, really had to dig deep and take a while to really say, hey, this is my decision, and what is my decision telling me, or what is my gut telling me? So that's a great one for this episode.
I know, because if you think about it, at the end of the day, who has to live with your decision? Not the people who gave you input. You have to live with the decision. And so I think there's also just a lot of people pleasing that comes into why we get used to seeking external validation for our choices. But at the end of the day, the decisions and choices you make are for you. I mean, maybe they impact other people, but certain decisions are your personal ones and impact you specifically, and you have to live with them. And so that's why learning to find those answers inside, I think, is so important.
I'm going to have to try to do that. I'm so glad you brought that up.
Yay.
I think for mine, it's just taking time for myself because that's something I just rarely do. And so I recently went to Costco and bought this warm heated blanket because it's been freezing in California. I guess other people are going to be like, no, it's not that cold. But for us, like in the 50s is cold. I was like freezing this morning. So I think just taking a time, like when my son is sleeping, usually I'm like doing all the stuff, right? Trying to clean, trying to prep food, trying to, do all these things. And so I take at least like 30 to 45 minutes out of my day just to sit with my warm blanket and either like I meditate or, I just think about my intentions for the week, or if it's just something where I can just be alone with my own thoughts. I am trying to get a little bit more of that because sometimes when it's quiet and you don't hear other people, you can really, think about, what you want and what your intentions are and what makes you happy. And so I'm trying to do more of that.
I always hear people say like, that phrase, like, I can't hear myself think. Mm-hmm. And like, you never really understood that until you had kids. Because like the house is just like always loud, right? And it's like, I really actually can't hear myself think. Like, what do I need to do next? Because you're so overstimulated with noise. So that's a good one. Yeah. Thank you so much, Shannon, for taking the time out of your day. I know you're so busy always, with your own schedule and your kid. And so we're really grateful we had this discussion, and hopefully it helps another parent out there normalize maybe if they're stuck between decisions and just really kind of like hard to come to terms with it or whatnot. Hopefully this helps somebody out there know that they're not alone. And maybe if people have more than one kid, it helps them sort of understand where people who want only one kid are coming from. There's so many reasons, right? Mm-hmm. But thank you for sharing your insights with us.
And thank you for having me. You guys are amazing.
We hope you have enjoyed Healing the Tigress and our conversations on maternal mental health in the Asian American Pacific Islander community. Please follow our show and our Instagram page to catch our latest episodes. We have so many fantastic guests and deep topics that we are so excited to cover soon.
If you enjoyed this episode or would like to support us more, please leave us a rating or a review and share this podcast with a friend to spread the word. Check out the show notes for more links. Thanks for joining us today, and we hope these conversations will help our AAPI mothers heal their inner tigress and honor their mental health as they deserve to. See you next time.